Today's episode is brought to us by CS Instant Coffee, the best coffee for any adventure you're going to go on. Use the code ADVENTURE at csinstant.coffee and get 50% off through September and October. So give it a shot. And we're also brought to you by Roam Products. They make elastic knit, minimalist style wallets with all sorts of designs. Get 20% off the perfect minimalist wallet for all your adventures. It'll hold everything you need by going to wheredouroam, ROAM.com, and use the code podcast with a capital P at checkout. And last but not least, we have Ombraz, the sunglasses that removed the arms and replaced it with a cord that you can cinch comfortably around your head. It will not fall off whatever you throw at it. So go to ombraz.com to learn more.
They didn't want to shoot us, and they were standing way too close to us. So we always thought, well, we can just grab their guns and just beat the crap out of them if we wanted to. But yeah, they are shotguns. They're not going to get all of us.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, trying to help you find adventure every day in any stage of life. You're going to hear from explorers, adventurers, business owners, and anyone living their life a little more out of the box than usual. Hey folks, I hope you had an incredible weekend. If you didn't, hopefully this episode makes up for it. We've got an awesome episode today with West Hansen. He paddled from the source as high as he could go on the Amazon River, all the way up at like 15,000 feet in the Andes, all the way to the ocean. It's the farthest journey down the world's longest river. And I know there's, debate about what's the longest river in the world, and we talk about that a little bit. It's between the Nile and the Amazon because of the definition of where they both begin. Anyway, if you'd like to hear more from West, he has a book that's getting ready to be released on audio, but it's in print now. It's been out for about a month. It's called The Amazon from Source to Sea, and it's on his website, westhansen.com. And that's also in the show notes. Also, you probably heard that we've got a new sponsor, Ombraz. They are sunglasses that don't have arms on them. They just have a cord on the back. And I wear them all the time. I've been wearing them for like 6 months. I love them. They're incredibly convenient. I can put them in my pocket without them getting crushed. And also, they want to do a giveaway on our show. So if you follow them on Instagram and also message them, saying that you would like a free pair. They're giving away 3 free pair this month, and they're valued at $150. So definitely worth your time to go to their Instagram page, Ombraz Sunglasses, and that is Ombraz. Check them out. They plant 20 trees for every pair they sell, so it's really cool what they're doing. Anyway, let's get into this episode. Wes, thank you for being on the show. I can't wait to talk to you about your upcoming journeys, which include next year kayaking, first ever kayaking expedition through the Northwest Passage, nearly 2,000 miles. So when he completes that, we will absolutely be getting back in touch with him. It's enough of my rambling. Enjoy. Where are you coming from today? Where's home for you?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Okay. Is that where you're from?
From League City, Texas, which is in between Houston and Galveston. But I went to college up here in the Hill Country at Southwest Texas State University. And after I met my wife with my first baccalaureate job, we moved here to Austin. So we've been here since 91. Before it got too expensive, actually. Yeah, so we got here at a good time, and we got our roots pretty deep now.
Awesome. Now, do you enjoy what Austin has become? I like it, but I didn't know what it was like before.
There are those old timers like myself who bemoan, it's not like it used to be. But, nothing's like it used to be. And Austin is still pretty wonderful. We are fortunate to live in the middle of the city. So everything's walkable. We don't have to get on the interstate or the highway to do anything. I like what they've been doing with the bicycle paths, which they're finally getting around to really putting some time and money and effort in so that we can bike around town easier. I I like it, and I'm okay with the changes because change is going to happen, and I think they're doing a smart job of it.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, it's a pleasant place to go. But like I said, I wasn't around. I didn't see it before all that. But man, talk about it's good for what you're doing, I guess, for Texas. I don't know if Texas has a lot of kayaking able rivers or anything, but it seems like there's at least some in Austin.
Well, yeah, and also you got to realize that flat water kayak racing is much more, excuse me, much more popular here, primarily because that's the kind of water we have. We don't really
Right,
have
right.
extensive whitewater. I took a whitewater kayaking course in college back in the early '80s, and we were fortunate then to have some floods that gave me some good river skills and knowledge and background. But then in the '90s, I quickly moved over to ultramarathon canoe and kayak racing just because that's what we have, long rivers with very little whitewater. So we've got a great ultramarathon community here.
That's awesome. And now, what have you always been into that? You said since college. Have you just been on the water your whole life, and why the ultra long distance stuff? And do you do stuff on land too, or do you kind of just stick to water?
Well, in college, I started marathon running just on my own, but I
Okay.
also took a course in whitewater kayaking. So, while I grew up on the coast in Texas, I really wasn't that much that water based. I didn't do a lot of paddling until college, and then I got into the whitewater scene, what there was of it here in Texas in the '80s. But as I mentioned, I probably only did that about 8 years before moving off into the flat water, and I've been doing that since '91. And recently, I started training again for marathons because my recognize that my shoulders are really taking a beating, and I don't have any balance. So I'm trying to get my legs back in shape. And currently, I'm up to about 13 miles, and hopefully by December, I'll be able to run a marathon again.
Very cool. Yeah, them legs have been resting for a while, huh?
Very atrophied, and it really really creeps up on you. And so I've had to start pretty slowly so I don't injure my legs getting back into it.
Oh, absolutely, man. That's it's amazing how, the bodies, you can just look at somebody and say, wow, you've been doing a lot of this for a long time. I know I'm come from the cycling world, and we're notorious for not having very strong upper bodies because, your arms
Right,
just kind of
right.
sit there all day.
Yeah, I could wrestle Lance Armstrong to the ground with a one hand tied behind my back, probably. But
I'm sure you
but
could.
that's about the size of it. And subsequently, that's where all the injuries happen. Also, that's what we use. So I've had 4 shoulder surgeries, 1 neck surgery, all due to ultra endurance paddling.
No, I mean, I guess it all comes at a cost, but I'm sure you wouldn't trade any of those experiences for any of the pain it's caused.
Fortunately, it's been more discomfort than pain, and I certainly wouldn't trade 1 minute of it. That's for sure.
That is awesome. And so I know you've done some races in the Austin area. Is that kind of how you got into the long distance kayaking and water sports? And then when did you start from there? Where did it build till you started doing expeditions?
Well, I started doing my first ultra marathon canoe race was in 1992, and I did the Texas Water Safari, which is our backyard race here. It's a 260-mile race that goes from the Texas Hill Country down to the Gulf of Mexico. It's nonstop. At the time, it was unsupported. You could only get water from one designated person, but you had to take all your own food. And I did that every year um, for several years. I've skipped a few years because of surgeries and expeditions now until I finally completed my 20th this year. And that is a really strong and entrenched culture here. So we obviously spend a lot of time on the water because the only way to really train to paddle nonstop 260 or 340 miles in the case of the Missouri River 340 is to get out there and do lots of river miles. And so that's the crowd we hung out with is the people that were out. Okay, let's go paddle 10 hours today nonstop. And so that I kind of peaked with my wins and my record setting in the early part of the century in my 40s. And it was at that time that I had a friend of mine, David Kelly, invite me to go race in Peru and the Great River Amazon Raft Race, which is a race whereupon you build a raft out of balsa logs, 8 balsa logs that are about
Wow.
16 feet long apiece. Yeah, these trees, and you can pick up a log easily because it's balsa. And then you race it in a stage race over 90 miles of 3 days over 90 miles. And so I was 46 years old at that time. I'm 57 now. And that was my first time to leave the country. I'd never been out of the United States. I'd never had a passport. It just never occurred to me. Texas is a very insular state and culture. A lot of people
Oh,
don't
it's
seem.
bigger than a lot of countries, so it's probably hard to get out sometimes.
Well, exactly. And it's not, people aren't necessarily bred to say, hey, you need to leave. No, it's just the opposite. It's like, why would you leave? Why we have tacos, we have barbecue, we have women. I mean, it's the best thing in the world. So anyway, I went down there and I fell in love with the Amazon River over the 2 weeks that we spent down there. And right after that, I read Running the Amazon by Joe Kane, which was this iconic expedition book, and immediately figured I was going to do it.
Wow.
So,
It just immediately upon reading the book.
it's a lot more concrete than that. I was reading the book on a flight between San Francisco and Austin when I was coming back from Peru, and I had a 3-hour layover in Phoenix. It was during those 3 hours that I read the entire book, drank about 4 or 5 Jack and Cokes, and by the time I got on my next plane, I knew I was going to paddle the Amazon.
A life-changing flight then. Jeez.
Yeah, and I started planning it from then on out, and it was just a matter of fact.
So after making that decision, what were some of your concerns going into it?
There were several. Yeah, there were several, and they changed in priority depending on where I was, A, in the planning, and B, during the expedition. Raising the funds, because I wanted to fund the entire expedition for everybody that was going down there, and that's what I did. Some of the guys made their own way down there, like on the whitewater team. I wasn't able to pay for all their tickets, but once they were there, I paid for all their hotels and their food and everything, and I got the kayaks from Jackson Kayaks. They were wonderful sponsors, and we had those shipped down there. And then the flatwater kayak from Epic and Valley Sea Kayaks. So I didn't want anybody to have to pay any money. I saw from other expeditions that's where things were strained, when someone couldn't come up with money and then they felt beholden to other people. So raising the money was a big deal. So I scraped and did that. Got sponsors, probably too many gear sponsors, but it was my first expedition. But once we got feet on the ground, the whitewater turned out to be much more treacherous, and that combined with the almost 15,000 feet of elevation in the Andes, we had altitude sickness and just poor energy levels. So early on, those were the problems we had to overcome, but that's what we did. We just overcame them. And then further down, when we got down to the cloud forest, that's one of the cocaine regions, and the Sendero Luminosa in Brazil. Sendero Luminosa in Peru were prevalent, and so we had to, make sure we had permission to go through these dangerous areas of the jungle, permission from the narco traffickers. So we did that. Once things settled down and became less dangerous around us, that's when I really started missing my family.
You had time to think about them at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Just 14 hours a day of endless paddling, and my wife and daughter were thousands of miles away. And it's one thing when you don't have a moment to think about them. When you're battling whitewater or gun wielding locals, then missing the family is a horrible thing. So that was really rough.
How often were you able to talk to them?
Well, I could have called them every day because we had satellite phones. And I did that fairly early on. But that made things worse because then you hear about, from my wife and daughter, what they did on a daily basis. My daughter was in school, in junior high at the time. And, they're talking about, the cat throwing up and mowing the lawn and homework. And here I was, trying to dodge pirates on the Ucayali River. Well, I didn't tell them any of that. I couldn't tell them that. No, none of us mentioned any of that stuff when it happened because we didn't want to alert our family of the dangers we were going through. So we only let them know that, a month later. So,
I'm sure they weren't happy about that.
well, they understood, and we did let people know that needed to know. In fact, we had help from the Peruvian military. They escorted us through some pretty bad areas, and of course, we let our PR guy David Kelly, after he left the support section of the river where he was there for the whitewater, he was the confidant. He knew everything. He knew all the politics with National Geographic, with Rocky, the guy that discovered the new headwaters of the Amazon. There was a lot of there was a lot of dissension in politics going on and a lot of subterfuge, and so David was privy to all of that.
So how'd you go into it with all the planning, and what was your mindset going into all this?
Well, fairly bright-eyed and naive. I mean, I thought the best of everybody, and then it turned out that there were some people with hidden agendas that weren't necessarily on the river with us, but had helped us set up with some of the administrative support and some of the logistics and things like this, and I spell that out a little more deeply into the book. But that was a bit of a surprise, and for instance, at one point, managerially, I was always counting pennies. I had a load of cash with us that we kept somewhat hidden because you can't, exactly take your Visa out when you're in a village on the Amazon. And so I was watching all the money we were spending and so forth. Well, and it quickly turned out that we were going to run out of money. We had a budget of, I think $80,000, and that wasn't going to be near enough. And so I appealed for some more money with National Geographic above and beyond the grant that we were given. And they wanted to see all of our receipts in an audit before they would even consider it. And I explained to them, I said, well, I'm kayaking the Amazon right now, or this is going to be a little difficult to pull together right this minute. And so that was a funny moment on a sat phone from thousands of miles from Washington, D.C. That was hey, would you mind putting together a spreadsheet for us and a proposal?
No biggie.
I'll get right on that.
Gosh, man. And speaking of National Geographic and all that, I know there's kind of a debate around the headwaters of both the Nile and the Amazon River. And, typically that wouldn't be a huge deal, but depending on how you define those, it makes one of those two rivers the longest river in the world. You obviously hold that the Amazon is the longest river in the world because of a newfound headwaters. Could you talk about that a little bit, and like what led you to? I believe that changed some plans for you after you started planning the trip, correct?
It goes a little further than that. So here's the course of events. Back in the early 1970s, Lauren McIntyre was on assignment from National Geographic. He had specialized in the Amazon River and the Amazon region and had done a lot of coverage down there for them since, I guess he was in the military there in the 1950s. And so in the early 1970s, he a Peruvian geographic expedition to look for the headwaters of the Amazon. And he, using fairly unscientific methods, determined that it was at the headwaters of the Corsante Creek on the Rio Apurimac watershed, the Apurimac River, which is in southern Peru. Flows pretty close to Cusco, if people are familiar with that area, but it goes further west towards the Pacific and the Andes. Well, that was a popularly held belief for several years, but no one had really compared it to other rivers. They just kind of hiked up what they thought was the longest river and planted a flag and said that was it. Well, and then the running the Amazon expedition was in the 1980s, and they hiked up to that one, and actually you could drive up to it, and then they paddled down to the Atlantic and said, okay, we were the first to go from the most distant source, the Amazon, and that wasn't really held into contention until Lauren McIntyre questioned it himself in 1992 in an article in a very obscure journal. And Lauren McIntyre said, you know what? I'm not really sure this is where the actual headwaters of the Amazon are located, the most distant source. And he named this other place up the Montaro River, at the head of the Montaro. And unbeknownst, Rocky Contos was had a plan to kayak all 5 of the main tributaries of the Amazon in Peru. And while he was doing that, he discovered that Lauren McIntyre's theory was actually true. Now, Rocky didn't know about Lauren's theory because the magazine that Lauren published this in was very obscure. So inadvertently, Rocky Contos proved Lauren McIntyre's theory correct. And he contacted me and said, hey, I think they misplaced the start of the Amazon. So when you do your expedition, you might want to start it somewhere, this other place. Well, it's 500 miles north of where the previous headwaters was believed to be. So it's not just a matter of walking further into the mountains. It's a 500-mile drive, or you take a plane. I mean, you're not going to get there in a day. And high into the Andes, this is more in middle Peru versus southern Peru. And in the headwaters of the Montaro River are near Lago Junin, which is actually the tallest lake in the world. Titicaca is the second. Titicaca is the tallest navigable lake in the world, but Lago Junin is the highest lake in the world. So Rocky said, you can start there, if you don't change your expedition without talking to me first. And then also if, let's see, what else did he say? And if you keep it a secret so I can announce it. And I said, sure. He went to National Geographic and got a grant to search for the new headwaters, and I got a grant to paddle from the new headwaters, 2 different grants. And then he was doing his research, and I was doing my paddle, and at this point, the guy that had done the expedition from the Tormac, who is featured in Joe Kane's Running the Amazon, he came on board on our team, and he was part of this team as well. And so he went down there with Rocky, and they found where the new headwaters were. And then a few months later, we went down there, and he showed us where the headwaters were located, and we left from there. Well, that's when everything kind of started blowing up, because then I discovered only after the fact that there's no real way to define what is the source of a river or even the mouth of the river. There's no geographic definition. A lot of people will say the source of a river is a lake. And when in the movie Mountains of a Moon, when Sir Richard Burton and Speke were looking for the headwaters of the Nile, they got to the Lake Victoria, and Burton said, here we are, the headwaters of the Nile. And Speke said, no, it's going to be actually a lake, a stream that spills in and makes this lake. And they started a controversy then. This was in the late 1800s. So this is not a new issue. There currently is no universally held definition of what constitutes a river, and that's what we ran into on our expedition. And so, in my book, and what Rocky Contos did in his journal, finally that he published, was he proposed a universal definition that all rivers could use. And the controversy is still out there. And I spell it out. In my book and also on my website, westhansen.com. But it has since led to a lot of controversy in the expedition community. Want to be able to say this is the longest river in the world, but you have to judge them by the same parameters. You can't say, this river is 2 million cubits long. Well, this river is 5 million feet long, so it's longer. You have to use the same units of measurement and the same definitions for the start. So using the same definitions, which is like the most universal definition, is from where the longest distance from where a raindrop or any drop of water could travel to get to the ocean. And that is the purest definition. It's just the raindrop. It's the simplest thing you can come from. Because then you don't rely upon a spring or a lake or snowmelt that may or may not happen, or a glacier that may or may not exist. You have to have a component that every river shares. And the only thing that every river shares is water.
It's not always possible to take a French press or coffee maker out in the woods with you, but thankfully now you don't have to because there is a great option in CS Instant Coffee. They make 100% Arabica instant coffee in compostable packaging. It's perfect for the outdoors or whenever you don't have the time to make a fresh pot. And right now, you can save 50% on your first order by going to csinstant.coffee and using the code ADVENTURE at checkout. One of my new favorite pieces of gear is actually my wallet, and that's because it's been inspired by Simplicity by Roam Products. It's a minimalist style wallet, holds my cash, my cards, holds it really tightly because it's elastic, and it's probably eliminated my wallet size down by 60 to 70%. They offer a variety of designs from artistic to patterns, and they're machine washable if they get dirty. They come with a little carabiner so you can clip it to things like your keys or your lanyard. And they also offer a complete line of silicone rings with a variety of styles and colors. So if you're tired of carrying around a big bulky wallet, go to wheredoyouroam, ROAM.com, and use the code PODCAST with a capital P at checkout for 20% off. So, is there someone out there, an organization that can basically answer this question for us rather than, a bunch of people having their own definitions?
There you go. That's the big question. There's no one stepping forward. There's no authority stepping forward to say that. In my book, The Amazon from Source to Sea, which comes out today, I lay out a proposal that's based upon what Rocky Contos first proposed, and that is exactly what I said: the farthest distance that a raindrop can travel from land to the ocean, from anywhere on land to the ocean. It has nothing to do with elevation or anything like that. And so when we say that, when you use that simple definition as opposed to a lake or whether the river dries up for part of the year or not, or anything to this nature, then the Montaro River is the most distant source of the Amazon. Same with Burundi for the Nile. There's the swamp in Burundi that fits that description as well and makes the Nile even longer. Not longer than the Amazon, but longer than any other source.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake with answering that question for sure. So I'm sure somebody's nervous about doing it. And what's crazy, I was looking up the longest rivers in the world. A lot of the longest, like the top 4 longest rivers are pretty decently close in size, like by a few hundred miles. It's kind of amazing how that's just kind of happened.
Right. Well, the Nile and the Amazon really are the only ones that are as close, because when you get down to the other 7 on the 7 continents, the Yangtze and the Volga, the Onyx in Antarctica, the Murray-Darling in Australia, they're far shorter than either the Nile or the Amazon.
Okay. So yeah, you decided to start the journey at that spot that's 500 miles north. Can you just paint a picture for us for what it looked like way up there, high elevation at the beginning of the Amazon? What was it like for you, and just describe that for us, where you started the journey?
It's where we went, and we actually, and just to lay it out there, I didn't leave from the most distant source. Our expedition was 4 miles short of the most distant source.
Well, dang it. I'm just playing.
That's okay. We still had a great trip, but afterwards, Rocky he still had some more research to do, and he discovered that there was a separate stream than the one we went down. The Rio Blanco is the most distant source, whereas the stream right next to it, the Rio Gashan, is the one from down which we traveled. So we were 4 miles short of the longest.
Do you regret not doing that?
Not at all. In fact, it's still there. I may go down and do it. But it's still out there. No, there are no regrets, I assure you. So what it looks like, we left from Lago Acucocha, which is a little over 14,000 feet in the Andes. We're well above the tree line. The air is crystal clear. The water is the cleanest you've ever seen in your life. There's no industry, obviously, up there. I mean, there are some mines further down, but right there at the headwaters, you're just surrounded by these snowy peaks, these jagged snowy peaks of the Andes, even in the summer. And the weather changes constantly. Within a 2-day span, we were in whiteout conditions, but we were also in t-shirt sunny conditions. There are just beautiful serene llamas and alpacas walking around in herds, nibbling on the ichu grass, which is crunchy under your feet. Occasionally the wind just blows like crazy through there. Sometimes it's just crystal quiet, and you can hear every breath everybody around you is breathing. The best I could describe is just serene. You can see storms coming from far away because you're so high up, and there's this huge valley between the two rims of the Andes. Dirt roads going here and there, villages with adobe buildings, Quechua people, just going about their lives. It's a really beautiful, magical place.
How soon could you get the kayaks in the water?
Well, we actually paddled across Lago Acacocho, which is about a 3-mile paddle. We said, okay, well, this is the source. There's water here and there's no water above it. So let's start here. And this is well before I'd done any research into anything about the source issue of rivers. I'd taken Piotr Mlynski's word saying, this is the source. And I said, all right, sounds good enough to me. Let's go. So we turned around and went. And we paddled immediately. The Rio Gashan is a rocky little stream, but we put in whitewater kayaks and we kind of knuckle dragged for 20 miles through there until the water got deep enough to actually paddle. So that took about a day and a half to just shove our way through the shallow water. Sometimes it was only ankle deep. But then when we got closer to Lago Junin, where the actual Rio Montaro proper starts, there's plenty of water and plenty of white water at that point.
So I imagine, the paddling up in the Andes was a lot different than the majority of the trip, which was in, kind of the more traditional Amazon, the big, muddy looking river.
Once we got through the Andes, it took us about 500 miles to get through the Andes. And then we switched from our whitewater team. We called them the Tigers. And that was led by Juanito de Ugarte. And the Tigers included international whitewater phenoms, these famous guys, Rafa Ortiz, Tino Specht, and Simon Yarovi. Very international team, very accomplished, of these guys that go over waterfalls all the time. After we finished with them on the upper, and we also had Santiago Ibanez on the lower part of that 500 miles, and Daniel Rondon. And we came to the Flatwater, which is where the Apurimac and the Montero get together. And this was the cloud forest. So we were still, in the mountains per se, but they were now green. And it didn't really open up, but it did speed up. After another couple of weeks, then it started getting wide when we got down to the Ucayali River and got fast. But there were no rapids. It was just this big, fast water. And it steadily got bigger and bigger. By the time we got into Brazil, a couple of thousand miles later, it was 5 to 10 miles across at places. And moving fast. I mean, you think of that as a lake, but it's actually moving quickly. You can stop paddling and measure it on your GPS, your speed, sometimes 3 or 4 knots.
Wow, that is surprising.
And you couldn't really tell if you're if you're 2 or 3 miles from shore trying to find the right flow, you can't tell you're moving until you look at your GPS, because there's nothing to compare it to.
Wow, that is crazy. So how many people, you mentioned, paying for the expedition and paying for everyone on, how many people were there on this trip, and did that change over the course of the trip?
Well, we started with about 17 people, because we had, my wife and daughter were there for the first month to help out. And then we had a huge support team on the whitewater section, because we were just hopping from one place to another. And I didn't know what to expect, so I just threw everybody at it that I could. By the time we got down to the Flatwater section, we switched boats over to sea kayaks, and we had 5 paddlers, 2 tandem kayaks, and I was in a solo kayak. And then at that point, we had with 5 paddlers. Then we had a photographer from National Geographic, Eric Schlegel, who's a friend of mine, Jason Jones, who was a Marine with jungle training, who was part of our support, and then Cesar Pena from Iquitos, who knew all the local languages, as well as really great English and German. So those guys stayed with us down to Iquitos, and then two of the guys in the kayaks left us at Iquitos, and it got down to just three of us, and then two support guys, and then the two support guys left us when we got to the Brazilian border. So the final about 2,300 miles, 2,500 miles, it was just three of us with no support.
Wow. Now, is that how you kind of wanted it to go, or you wish it would have been different?
Yeah, no, it would have been great to have a boat follow us, give us food and stuff. In fact, you interviewed Darcy Geckner a little while ago. I heard your interview with her. She was the first woman to do the Amazon. She did it about a year after we did, and I was on her support team in the Whitewater, and their team had a yacht that followed them from well into Peru all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And every day they'd stop and pull over and they'd sleep on the yacht and they'd get, supper and maybe and there's wonderful stuff. And I thought, man, that is definitely the way to go. I would love to have had something like that. For the last 10 days, we had to hire a boat with a gunman on it because we were going through some very high, heavy pirate areas. And so we slept on the roof of that boat during that time, and they carried our food for us and water. So that was nice. The last 10 days. Well, actually, we had 13 days to go, and they weren't with us the last 3 days. So 10 of the last 13 days, we had a boat with us.
And you were dealing with a lot of pirates and cartels and stuff like that, correct? As you got further into the Amazon?
Yeah, and as you get further into Brazil, there are more places for them to hide. The little channels of water that fan out are called igarapes, and which translates from Portuguese straight into pathways. And these thin little pathways just kind of disappear into the jungle, and a small motorboat can disappear in there, and you'll never find them. So they dash out of there, they rob you, they shoot you, they kill you. They do whatever they do, then they dash back in before the authorities can find them and disappear into the jungle. So it's a pretty dangerous area.
Jeez. And now you've talked about this before, so I don't mind bringing it up. You were held at gunpoint, I think 5 times, right?
Right, 5 times in total. Yeah.
Wow. So, was every experience similar? Did you feel different about each one? I mean, are all held at gunpoint experiences created equal? And what was that like?
It was very surreal. I've been around, we're from Texas, so we've been around guns a lot. And, the first time we were held at gunpoint was in that cloud forest I referred to earlier, and it was just us 5 kayakers. Our support boat was still a day behind us. And it was some locals, and we immediately realized that they had single-shot 20-gauge shotguns that were pretty ancient, and there were 5 of them. And we all kind of and they didn't speak very good Spanish. They spoke kind of a weird dialect, but it was a local. I'm not sure if it was Ashkenazi, but it was or Ashkeninka, but it wasn't Quechua. I knew that because we were starting to learn a little Quechua by then. But the bottom line was we couldn't communicate very well with them, and they were. I mean, it's not like they were in native clothing; they were in soccer clothes, and they came down to the river where we were filtering some water just during a break, and held us at gunpoint and searched our stuff. They were worried that we were there to harm them, and we picked up on that pretty quickly. They didn't want to shoot us, and they were standing way too close to us. So we always thought, well, we can just grab their guns and just beat the crap out of them if we wanted to. But yeah, they are shotguns. They're not going to get all of us. But that's not why we were there. And we did not want to be a threat to these people. They had already been persecuted so much by outsiders that we didn't want to become one of those people. And so we let them search our stuff, and then they let us go. And then after that, 2 times we were held at gunpoint by the Rondeiro, which are the private police force of the narco traffickers, to keep law and order in the narco traffic area so they can conduct their business. And so long as we were not part of the police or any kind of law enforcement, then we were safe to pass through their cocaine producing area. And they figured that out pretty.
Wow,
Yeah,
really?
they want law and order. They don't want people, murdering and stealing stuff. They've got business to do.
Wow. The cartel's keeping law and order. That is nuts.
You got it. And then we weren't held at gunpoint again until we were well within Brazil. And then the fourth time, I was actually pretty nervous. I was worried that we'd get shot by accident because there was these five teenage punks, and they had various, crappy firearms, and they were nervous and they were shaking. And I thought, oh no, these idiots are going to shoot us, by accident. And those I was a little concerned about just because they were inexperienced. The rest, it was business. They were just holding us up to find drugs, and we didn't have any. The final time was a vigilante group who were looking out for narco traffickers, and they quickly knew that we were okay. And after questioning us for a little bit, they let us go. They didn't search anything. I mean, we had National Geographic flags on our kayaks. So these guys were a little bit more on the ball, and they saw that, yeah, you don't transport drugs by kayaks, so they let us go. But the attitude was, other than the fourth time with those punks, it wasn't that big a deal because we knew what they wanted or what they didn't want, and it was just business. And once they weren't pointing the guns at us, I felt okay. We could talk to these guys, but you got to get past the whole gun pointing thing. We only got shot at once, and that was our photographer was given a warning shot over the bow, and he didn't care for that much.
Different kind of shooting than he's used to, huh?
Well, yeah, he hit the deck pretty good, but the Marine that was with him, Jason, took it pretty personally, and he found the guys 2 nights later in a bar on the Amazon, and man, he had enough beer in him that he was going to take all of them on, and I think he could have taken out a lot of them, but luckily he had the mayor of the town and the photographer holding him back, and it was a wild time. I got to tell you, you need to read the book.
So for the last 6 months, I have completely switched over to Ombraz sunglasses, and that's because they fixed everything that frustrates me about sunglasses. First of all, they removed the arms, so it's just a cord that connects the frame and it goes around your head, and it's able to cinch and securely fit against my head. Doesn't shake off at all, and when you pull them off, it's completely flat because there's no arms, so you can't break them. So I put them in my pocket and they're good to go. You can wear them in the river, you can wear them biking, you can wear them playing basketball outside. They're not going to fall off, and you don't get a headache from the arms pressing up against you. I was skeptical until I put them on, and honestly, I don't even have any other pair of sunglasses now. And also, they give back to the environment. They use zero plastic packaging. They plant 20 trees per every pair that's sold. And to date, they've planted over 125,000 mangrove trees. So if you'd like to get a pair, go to ombraz.com, and that is OMBRAZ.com. Jeez, man. Now, would you say that was the most dangerous part of this journey, or was there something else?
Oh gosh, really hard to rate. I mean, we went under this thing called the water cannon, Juanito de Ugarte.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I saw this video of this water just spilling out from the side of this mountain, and it looked pretty dangerous, but it also looked man-made. Yeah, what was that about?
Well, yeah, this happened one day after the other, these two incidences. The first was this water cannon where it's a spillway that goes, it's a tunnel drilled 20 miles through the Andes, and the water is forced in there from upriver on the Montaro, turns the tunnel, which is very ingenious. But then it's got to go somewhere, so it shoots out the other side of the Andes, and we had to paddle under this thing. Just tons and tons of water coming on us, and we almost got sucked into it. And so that was an eye opener. And then the next day, we paddled down to a place where they're building a new dam called the Rio Aguila Dam or something like that. I don't even think they have a name for it yet. But they were blowing up both sides of the canyon as we were going through, kayaking through there, and so these huge boulders were raining down on us, and we got on the walkie-talkie, and Juanito got on the walkie-talkie and asked them to please stop setting off their dynamite charges. But those came close to hitting us. And well, they did pelt our helmets, but none of the larger, refrigerator-sized boulders hit us. But they were pretty close. That was kind of scary. The river at that point on the Montaro was only about 20 feet wide. So there wasn't a whole lot of places for us to hide. So that was tense.
Just with all the inherent dangers of, a river, it's so crazy to me that it's the man-made things that cause so much issue for you. The tunnel that's spewing water, the dynamite, the cartels, etc.
Right, exactly. It was the dynamite that'll always slow you down. But there are other tense times. I had to deal with the customs officials in Iquitos, which is another couple of 100 miles before you get to the Brazilian border. But they wanted a lot of money just for me to paddle my kayaks out of their country that I'd already paid several $1,000s for. So there's a big shakedown there, and we had the military on our side, but my temper grew a little short at a few times, and luckily our photographer and the military attaché that we had with us, held me back when I got a little overzealous towards some customs officials. So, there's always alcohol involved in these things.
Oof, yeah, that probably created some more problems than expected.
Specifically for medicinal reasons only. And the final tense moment happened at the end. We didn't have any support after Belém. Belém is in Brazil near the Atlantic Ocean, and it's about 75 miles from the mouth of the Amazon, where the Amazon actually meets the Atlantic Ocean. And so we didn't have any support after that, so we paddled nonstop for 40 some odd hours with and against the tide, day and night, to get to the Atlantic. And the tides at the mouth of the Amazon are just horrendous. And we finally pulled over after about 24 hours, and we camped on top of this sandbar about 12 feet above the water. Well, this was about 7 o'clock at night, and we fell asleep in our tents and woke up to water coming into the tents 2 hours later. So in a span of 2 hours, the river at that point is 90 miles wide. 90 miles. It's a flowing river, and it's not a bay. It is unmistakably a river. And we woke up to water coming into our tents, had risen 12 feet in 2 hours, and we just threw everything into our cockpits real quickly into our sea kayaks. And we had 12 miles to go at that point to get to the Atlantic, to a point that we had made out on our GPS. And we couldn't see land around for miles because it was dark, and there's no houses or anything out there. It's all mangrove swamps. There's no roads. There's nothing. And so we said, well, let's just paddle now and finish this thing out. We only have 12 miles. So it took us 6 hours to paddle against these huge waves that kept getting bigger and bigger as we got closer to the Atlantic. And at one point, right towards the end, the waves were in between 20 and 30 feet high coming at us. And we were so afraid that they would crest. They were these giant steep rollers, and the only way we could see them coming is that the stars, and we just saw these mountains of blackness coming at us. So we'd race up to the top just so we wouldn't slide back down, and then slam down over the top and race down to the bottom and dive in, and just to do it again up the other side. And I just kept staring at my GPS, and we just kept paddling against these mountains of water to get to the Atlantic. And finally we hit it and paddled a few hundred more yards just to make sure, and then turned around and hightailed it to the nearest bit of land we could find.
And then what? Did you have anything set up to... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. That was about 3 a.m. And so we kind of crash landed into this beach and set up our tent. We dragged a couple hundred yards up the beach because, we didn't know what the tide was going to do, from what happened earlier that night. And so we just fell in the tents and woke sunshine the next morning, and we had to paddle back into land, another 25 miles to the nearest town. So that was a little depressing. And then, so we started paddling, and after about 5 miles, we found a fishing boat, and we went and begged them for a ride, and we gave them all the money we had, which is about 25 reals, the Brazilian reals, and gave them all of our peanut M&Ms that we had left. And they were so nice. They were so sweet to us. They were gentlemen. And I got their pictures, and they shared their fish with us, and we ate, and they took us in with their powerboat 2 hours to the nearest town, which was great. And we were able to catch a ride there back towards Berlin, to Mosquero, actually.
And the journey was complete. Well, other than getting back home and probably getting all your stuff, you probably still had a lot of work to do.
Yeah, but you're right. It was complete. It was then the hard part was getting used to getting back to civilization after being gone for 111 days. So that was a bit difficult.
Yeah, how was that for you? Because I love to ask that question, and the answers vary greatly. So, what was your experience?
Well, I'm not sure I've gotten back over it yet. I mean, it's been 7 years, and I keep getting drawn back. We did the Volga 2 years later in Russia. That's Europe's longest river. We were the first kayak source to see the Volga, and I'm still drawn back. It's Jeff Weisty, who has been on all my expeditions, or all two of them so far. He's an old friend, known him for almost 30 years, and racing buddy. And he put it really well when he said that, what we're experiencing after a couple of months out of there, what we settled into was moving at a natural pace, a pace of that we were evolved to go, the speed of the river, the speed that we can just paddle ourselves, and we can take in with our senses things as we should. Nothing too fast, nothing 80 miles an hour, or communication across the world, within milliseconds, and constant input from everywhere. Well, when you're traveling at a natural pace, you can really take in a lot more because it's not coming at you. You're not trying to drink from a fire hydrant, and you can sip the world at a leisurely pace, and it's just a wonderful experience, I got to tell you. So getting used to the world again has been difficult. I really become less tolerant of people whining about whether their soy latte is half calf or half decaf, and people complaining about how horrible things are, in this incredible Disneyland in which we live, when there are people along the Amazon that are very happy, to have a plate of food and not so dirty water. I mean, we can all go into our houses and use a restroom, and it goes away from our house. The sewage leaves our house. That alone is cause for celebration.
It's amazing. It really is.
So I've come to really appreciate those things. And the other side of that coin is I have to bite my tongue a lot when I hear people complaining about how hard they have it here in North America.
Gosh, man, we could I'm sure it's just unbelievable when we start to think about everything we do have that's so wonderful. And that is one of the most amazing byproducts of adventure and expeditions, is how much you do appreciate, just little things, just the smallest thing, like a hot cup of coffee or clean water or a shower. What would you say? That was really interesting what you said, your friend Jeff said about, living at a natural pace while you're on a river. It's kind of the way nature intended, because it's the way nature, it's the speed nature's going along the river. How do you think you transition that back into normal life? What does that look like to be at a natural pace back home? Maybe you haven't figured it out yet, but maybe you have some ideas of what it looks like.
I've come to a somewhat of a detente in that I prefer the company of others less, and I'm a little more particular about who I spend time with. And I know that sounds kind of standoffish, but I hope the people with whom I spend time realize that, and I really value those people, and I don't have a lot of room for more time alone now. I've discovered I like writing, so I've got a couple other books, and so I guess that's the best way I've coped with it. Plus, then planning more expeditions. So I'm looking forward to going to the Northwest Passage in 2020. With Jeff Weisty and Jimmy Harvey. We're calling ourselves the Arctic Cowboys, and we're going to be the first to kayak the entire Northwest Passage. And to do so,
bittersweet.
Yeah, and it is bittersweet. And we want to do a good job of pointing out the fact that it's going to quickly, much quicker than we think, become a superhighway
for barges and other vessels. You mean? Super
tankers, container ships that are littering other parts of the world right now. It's going to be, other than the tip of South America and Panama Canal. This less volatile route, much larger. There's no dredging. There's no violent storms. Just ice, and the ice is quickly going away.
My goodness. And now, yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that once you complete it. And that's next year, man. You're cranking these things out. You're getting good at this. This expedition planning.
Well, it also takes money. So I spend a lot of time calling and begging for money. So if any of your
Exactly.
listeners out there want to sponsor one of our endeavors, we would love to talk to you. So please give me a call or just go to my website, westhansen.com, and we can set it up.
Can I ask you what do you do with the rest of your time? What do you do for a career to make these kind of things possible? I think a lot of people would be interested about that.
Oh, okay. Well, my degree is in psychology, and I'm a social worker. I'm a licensed social worker. I worked for years in the public mental health system in Texas, but now I work with our family business, and we contract with home health care agencies to provide all of their social work services, which includes helping people with their healthcare benefits. As you know, here in the United States, we have a really convoluted and very confusing spider web of healthcare coverage. And so I do what I can to learn all about that and help people make sure that they can get their healthcare they need in their later years.
And so that allows you the ability to take time off when you want to do an experience like this in an expedition.
I am self-employed, and I have a very tolerant and supportive family. My mother, my father, my sisters, cousins, my nieces, my great-nephews, my nephews, my daughter, my wife. I recommend people go out and get themselves a family because they are great.
They're pretty awesome, aren't they?
They tolerate. My sister Barbara, she did not plan on becoming the manager of my expeditions, but about 2 weeks into the Amazon expedition, we found that there was that position that was desperately needed between us and the outside world, and she filled that gap. She jumped into it, and she has since been the manager of all my expeditions. And she's able enough to handle anybody and not take crap, including from me. She's had to back me down several times. If I come off the river and I'm for the day, and I do one of our daily satellite phone calls, and I'm cranky and I'm complaining at her, she will tell me to shut the hell up.
That's good, man.
Yes,
That's what you need.
Yeah, I do at times. Unfortunately, I do.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a better life than being able to go on these adventures, enjoy it, and then come home to such a great family. I mean, the balance between the two is just like, wow. I have that experience myself and thank them every day.
Well, my wife and I are getting close to retirement, and that is and it's turning out at a really good time because at 57 years old, I'm getting a lot of experience behind me, and we got a lot of gear, so we can go pretty much everywhere. And I hope my wife and I can start doing some expeditions together. She's not water-based, so it'll have to be something on land, but she can hike me into the ground. So we want to do some exploring in the northern part of South America in the Guiana Highlands, where the tepuis are located, all those flat-top mountains you saw in the movie Up. The little cartoon movie. The highest waterfalls in the world, Angel Falls and such, are located. So we want to do some exploring there, and obviously some other mountain ranges around the world. So hopefully I can start doing some things with my wife that aren't necessarily water based.
Perfect, awesome. And now you mentioned your book came out literally today, and I would love for folks to. That's awesome, exciting. Congratulations. I'm sure that was, an expedition in itself to write that.
Oh man.
At least for me it would be, because I don't like writing. So it takes a lot of patience. So where can people find out about that? And it's about the expedition itself, the Amazon expedition.
That's correct. The book is entitled The Amazon From Source to Sea, the farthest journey down the world's longest river. And I'm the author. There's no ghost author. I had a great editor in Jeff Moog. Jeff is the former director and editor of Canoe and Kayak magazine, and he knew all about the politics involved in my expedition as it was happening. And so he became an excellent editor for the book and made me sound Really do. And I had to learn to write. So it's one thing turning my journal notes, into something that's readable. That was a lot of work. The book is on Amazon, as are most books. They have a pretty good markup. So if you want a little bit better deal, then I would buy it directly from my website at westhansen.com. That's WESTHANSEN.com. Those are direct sales. It's also available on ebook through Amazon. And next Monday, I start recording the Audible version, or the audio version of the book here in Austin. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, the Audible version will be ready at audible.com.
Awesome. Yeah, well, you got a great voice, and we'll have to interview you again about some of these other expeditions. And so that'll be really entertaining.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Especially for our listeners, because they're already used to listening to things. Man, as my last question, I just want to know, I know with a lot of adventurers, there's just kind of one thing that sticks out to them when they look back on their life and what they've done. Do you think this Amazon journey for you is going to be kind of that experience for you, where it's like, of everything I've done, that thing is, I'm very proud of that. Something about it. Did it have the it factor to it?
I'm not sure because it did. I see it as the first step in a lot more. It definitely is not the hardest thing I've ever done. Right. It was very indulgent, but one thing that I'm so grateful for is that it taught me not just how to do an expedition, but that I could. And I really want to convey in my book and anytime I speak to groups how close this is to just the common person, because I did possess paddling skills. I mean, I was a ultramarathon canoe racer, but that was it. I knew nothing about running an expedition, so I just read about all the other expeditions. The information is out there. People can do these things. You just need to do some research, plan on it, talk to people like me who have done it, and listen to what they say. Unfortunately, there are people that who talked to me who didn't, and they're dead now. So there are things to be learned from people that have gone before you. And the Amazon, once again, as you mentioned, it's not necessarily it for me, but it definitely started it for me.
That's awesome to hear. Well, I can't wait to see what else you decide to do and what else you accomplish. And we'll be sure to have you back on the show at some point.
I really appreciate you doing these podcasts. They're wonderful to listen to. I'm on the road for 3 hours at a time, driving across Texas, and I listen to every one of them.
Oh man, that's awesome to hear. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I'll keep trying to do a good job. I'll pay attention.
You're doing a great job, Mason.
All right. Thank you, Wes. Have a great day, man.
All right. You take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.